Welcome to Ferment Radio, a podcast series on bacterial and social fermentation. Fermentation can incite social action, spark creativity, and bring surprising new tastes to our lives. My name is Aga Pokrywka, and I invite you to join us in a conversation on living interconnectivities, from macro to micro, from societal to cellular, and from global to personal. We associate these institutions with petrified displays and long-gone worlds that are alien to our own experience, museums. Whether we like it or not, they play a crucial role in preserving heritage. Can heritage be something alive and ever-changing? It seems that yes. At least Micropia, a one-of-a-kind museum showing the invisible world of microorganisms, is doing that. Micropia is a museum in Amsterdam in which visitors can learn more information about microbes and see live microbes on display too. The museum fills a gap between the general public's knowledge on microorganisms and the science behind microbiology. Unknown is unloved, they say on their webpage, and they definitely want to change that. On Ferment Radio's new episode, we talk with Micropia's lab technicians, Loek van Buuren and Eline van Bloois, about curating microbes, preserving what is alive, and dreaming about immersive experiences which could allow us to float with microbes in their micro-universe.
I am Loek. I'm a lab technician. I work at Micropia. I've been working there for 1 year and 9 months now. And of course, we're all busy with maintaining the museum and doing all the exhibition things, keeping everything alive. And on the side, I also work a lot with the content production team for making stuff on social media, which I also really enjoy doing. So it's very cool that I'm able to do it as well here at Micropia. Yeah.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Eline. I'm also one of the lab technicians at Micropia. And I do, quite similar work to Loek. Yeah. I also work on the, maintaining the exhibits, growing all the microbes and working on all the content, for instance, the social media.
Thank you. So what is actually Micropia? Because we are repeating Micropia, but what is it actually for those who never heard about it?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, actually. Not everyone has heard about Micropia. So Micropia is actually, a micro zoo, microbe museum. It's part of the ARTIS Zoo in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. We opened in 2014, and this allowed the zoo, to the Artist Park, to really become more adapt to what it actually is called, because it's officially called Natura Artis Magistra, which stands for nature teaches humans. And they were of course already showing the animals in the collection. They also have quite a big collection of different plants, but the invisible small heritage, the small microbes, they weren't really represented yet. And when Micropia opened, they now also had this microbe zoo, so to say, to show all of those invisibly small organisms.
Since we are only listening about it, but could you maybe tell a little story how Micropia actually looks? Let's say I'm standing in front of the building and I am entering, and then what? Is it the microbes are exhibited in petri dishes, or maybe they are screened on the projections? Could you give us a audio, a super short audio tour around Micropia?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So when you first visit the museum, it's kind of an old building. It's very beautiful. It's in the center of Amsterdam, and it's basically just really pretty to look at as well. And when you enter the museum, you basically first go up with the elevator, and then you come into this kind of different world. You have all of these audio tapes as well. And kind of the first thing that you see is basically the tree of life, where we show like what kind of life is invisible. So we show what part of the tree of life is actually all invisible, and that's quite a big part. And then afterwards, you really get to see all of the microbes hands-on, because you have all of these microscopes with all of these different exhibitions, so there you can actually look at them for yourself. So it's very interactive. And we tell all these different kinds of stories with these microbes as well. So you can really see them hands-on, because you can look at them through the microscope yourself. So that's very nice as well. And then at the top of the museum, we really show more of the fundamental knowledge, because of course, most people are not really familiar with microbes. So we really want to explain that to them, what they are, how they look, and to kind of get a feel for them as well. And then you can also see the laboratory where, of course, we work. And then we also have a floor down where it's more kind of the applications of what these microbes can do. So for the production of food, for example, and also for the production of fertilizer. So that's kind of all of the things that we show in the museum as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I also have to say, I think one of the things I think is really cool is that we managed to create this very unique atmosphere. When you enter the museum, you enter in quite a dark, futuristic, surreal environment, and it really helps to kind of pull you away from what you already know or what you think you know about microbes, and it really allows us to reintroduce them and really allow visitors to get to know these microbes, because most people, they do have kind of an association with microbes, but it's not always a very positive association. And I do think only about 1% to 2% of all microbes that we know of can be harmful, and all those other microbes, they are never talked about. People don't really think about them, and creating this very unique atmosphere allows us to open up that conversation a little bit more.
You mentioned the word like museum, and that is full of microbes, and I imagine that part of your job is basically maintain that life in the museum, and it must be, I just imagine, but correct me if I am wrong, like maintaining so much life in the museum, and also kind of such an independent life, because like microbes are actually quite like they will do kind of, they're quite independent in a way. They will do anyways what they want, I have a feeling. But what is the challenge of a museum who works with like a live species, which are actually often so like there is still a lot of things to be understood about them? Is it really a challenge, or it's just in my head?
No, it's quite a challenge. Yeah. It can get difficult sometimes. I think the most difficult part of our job is that we have so many different ones. So most like research labs will have like a specific microbe or a specific group of microbes that they will focus on. But we have lots of different of them. So from bacteria to algae, yeast, fungi, and all those different things. So the biggest challenge is what these broad microbes all need, and having all of those things ready for them. That's things is quite the biggest part of our work, because you have such a different collection. Yeah.
Are the microbes in the exhibition, are they changing actually? Like, oh, this microbe is like, let's take it off from the exhibition and let's exhibit the new one, or is rather like an exhibition which is pretty steady?
Yeah, so you have to imagine we prefer to show living microbes. And if you want to show something that's living, of course, it has a certain lifespan. And microbes, they have a lot shorter lifespan than, most plants or animals. If you take the microbe that's most often used as a reference, the E. coli bacterium, in optimal conditions, it lives for about 20 minutes. Now, I have to say it can live a little bit longer. If it's in the human body, it can live up to 15 hours, I believe. But then you're still not even dealing with something that lives for an entire day. So what we are continuously doing is monitoring everything in the museum. Indeed, we change out samples because, if you want to show living microbes under your microscope, you have to make sure they're living under the microscope. So every hour or so, we will be walking around and monitoring everything that's going on with all of the microbes in the museum.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, we have one exhibition where we actually change the microbe each month. So we highlight a different microbe each month. And that's a very fun thing to do because we also have to discuss what microbes we want to highlight, what stories we want to tell with them. And that is a very nice thing to do. So that changes every month. And we also give talks in the museum, and it kind of depends on the microbe that we have that month, like what talk we're going to be about, what kind of stories we want to tell. So it's not always the same type of microbe that we show. Sometimes it really changes. We have some microbes that are standard in our collection, but we also change them around a bit from time to time. That's also very fun to do.
Micropia as a museum, I believe, as any museum, is also responsible for preserving a heritage. So what kind of heritage Micropia is displaying? Like why microbes should be perceived as heritage?
Yeah, so this is actually a kind of a funny story. We actually never really called ourselves a museum. We always called ourselves more of a science center that meets a microbe zoo, so kind of a combination of the two of those. And actually, in the Netherlands, we have this thing. It's called the Museumjaarkaart, where you can basically get a subscription to a lot of musea in the Netherlands, which I think is really cool. But as soon as we became a member of that, we also were being called a museum. So it's really kind of slipped in there. But we do have some very unique collaborations. So we are a science center, but we do collaborate with artists and designers that look at the world, with very different eyes. So this allows us to also display microbes in different ways. So we have, I think, about 10 pieces of art in the museum from international artists that also show microbes through the eyes of these artists. So you could call that the cultural heritage of Micropia, I think.
You've mentioned actually before that there is a part of the exhibition which periodically display like one kind of a microbe and kind of decides, I don't know, like what story will be told about it. So on what kind of basis microbes are being curated, because there is quite a lot of choice out there, right? It's not such a limited choice we got if we think about microbes.
Yes, yeah, it's quite unlimited, right? Yeah, and then there's still microbes being discovered every now and then there's only more choice. It never really lessens. So what we did when the museum was first opened is, first they came up with the stories that they wanted to tell, because indeed there's unlimited options. So what stories do you want to tell? And then the makers of this museum, they really collaborated with researchers to decide what kind of stories can we tell, what's something that's being studied as well, like what's being done right now. And they were really looking for this connection between the microbes and ourselves, humans. What microbes do you breathe, and what microbes live in your intestines, but also how will microbes indeed maybe in the future produce fuel for us. So they really looked at those connections, and then they came up with the stories that they wanted to tell, and based off these stories they then selected the microbes. That's how they curated the collection that you can see all the time.
Mm-hmm.
For that changing exhibit, we actually get together with a team of people, and then indeed we're looking at what are interesting stories, but also what are recent stories. Like maybe some very interesting research is currently being done, like with bacteria, with fungi, I think it was, that are actually breaking down the plastics. And it's a really cool story. So then we also want to be able to share that story with our visitors. So that's how we, part of how we try to decide, which microbes we show.
We really want to make it accessible to the people visiting us. So we really look at what is familiar for people, what do people already know, and how can we kind of incorporate microbes into that mix. So sometimes we maybe, because it's spring, we're talking about spring microbes and how those things kind of work out, and how can microbes help you fall in love, and those kinds of stories. So we kind of really want to see what do people really enjoy and what do they like, and how can we connect microbes.
So this is the microbe which is currently on the display, the spring microbes.
Yeah, this year we didn't do the spring one. Right now we're talking about fermentation, so it's very nice for Ferment Radio. We're talking about sauerkraut fermentation, so we're displaying the microbe that is kind of responsible with helping with sauerkraut fermentation, and we're also kind of explaining to the people how they can do that themselves.
I mean, it seems you have a fantastic and fascinating job, and I wonder like how your usual workday looks. You already mentioned that you need to like go around the exhibition to check if everything is alive and kind of doing all right, but what takes up your time?
Very good question, because it is never a day is the same. So it's always different. There's a lot of stuff happening at the same time. So of course our main job here is to maintain the whole museum. So we all have kind of organisms that we are responsible for. So everybody has kind of their own species that they take care of. So we might be like, for example, if I need to do one of the algae that day, we will be working on that, seeing if they are still looking good in the culture and deciding if we want to like continue them, dilute them, give them any more food, those kinds of things. So that's kind of the standard thing that we do. And we all have different species of microbes that we have. But we could also, for example, we give the talks twice a day about the stories that we want to tell with the microbes. So that's also a thing that we do on a regular basis. And we're also like having meetings, talking about what content we can produce, talking about how we can improve the museum. And we always have some interns as well that we need to kind of take care of. We need to direct around. So that's also what we do. So it's a very diverse job. We have a lot of different things going on at the same time. So it's never a dull moment, as we always say at Micropia.
Did you have any experiences that kind of the microbes took over, or they decided to do totally something else, or some other kind of disaster, or everything is always under control?
I mean, you're dealing with living organisms, so there will always be little mistakes, little surprises. Yeah. So I mean, you also have to imagine we're working with about 300 different species of microorganisms. So it's quite easy to accidentally get microorganisms into another culture, so that you're looking at your algae and you're like, hey, I thought this was another algae I put in here, or it's a mixture of
a lot of contamination happening.
Yeah, a lot of contamination. And that's often quite surprising, and it can be quite challenging. But until now, I think we've managed it quite nicely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like the biggest thing that I can think about is that one time one of our culture media was prepared wrong, and then all the organisms that were using that media kind of all went bad. And I think it was like 5 or 6 algae or something, and we also feed those algae to other organisms, and they all started to go very bad. So that wasn't very nice. But I think that's the biggest thing that we've had. Normally we have everything pretty much under control. It gets pretty hectic, but we do manage.
Exactly. Just make sure you prepare your food well. Just like you do for yourself, you also have to do that for your microbes.
Yeah, it seems that it applies for everybody, right? Like for humans as well. What about like maybe object in the exhibitions or experience at Micropia, which seems to have like the biggest resonance with the people, with the visitors, the people who come to see the exhibition? What is like maybe the most impressive or shocking?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Mm-hmm. Right now I'm thinking of 2 of the exhibits. Mm-hmm. I don't know whether you are as well.
I think I am. You can tell that.
So first we have we call this exhibit the body scan. And basically you can stand in front of this, quite a big screen, and you're actually being scanned. And it shows you, first of all, how many microbes you are carrying with you. And to a lot of people that's already quite shocking because, it's a very high number. Actually, you have more microbe cells in your body than you have human cells. And then you can also actually travel through your own body and find out what microbes you can find in which spots. And then also how they are actually helping you. So in your intestines, you can, for instance, learn how microbes help you to digest your food. So a lot of people really enjoy that. There's always, quite a bit of a marvel at the amount of microbes. A lot of discussion. Do you have more microbes, or do I have more microbes on my body?
Yeah, that's always a very fun one. You see people like, oh no, you have more than me. Why is that? And that's always a very fun thing to see. Yeah.
But then it's also difficult to interpret it. Is it better or worse?
Yeah, you can also imagine if you're a bigger person, you have more space for microbes to grow. So then it also makes sense that maybe you're carrying a little bit more microbes with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the other exhibit that I think people are really surprised by is what we call our roommates exhibit. And here we basically took everyday objects, even air from different locations, and we just started growing the microbes that you could find on them. So you can find the microbes that you maybe have on your smartphone or on the money you're carrying with you, or maybe the microbes that could be living in your living room. So a lot of people are really, really surprised by diversity of all those microbes, but also by the way that they look, because they all look very different. If you ask me, I think they're really, really pretty. But yeah, that's really something people are quite surprised by.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also one thing that's always very funny, you can see like through a window in the museum to the lab, and sometimes people will wave at us, see if we're actually real people, and then we wave back and we're like, yeah, we're really here. And that's always a very funny thing to do, that we have an actual lab there. That's a lab that's been doing all of this growing, and they always think, well, maybe these are just pictures or movies, or you guys are actors. But no, we're actually real, and we're actually real like microbiologists working there. So that's always a very fun thing as well.
Yeah. We also jokingly say to each other, like, we're the biggest organisms here in this museum.
Yeah. Actually, I have to say, I never been in this museum. When I was preparing for this interview, I watched a lot of videos and documentations, some reviews, and from what I hear from you, it's a very interactive experience. But for people like me who haven't been there yet, but I hope it will soon change, what would you recommend to kind of experience microbes or play with microbes in your home settings? Because I saw on your webpage that you have some like a little experiments or and so on. But could you advise what would be the best way for the beginners to kind of hang out with microbes?
Yeah. So what's the best way for a beginner to hang out with microbes? I mean, you're already called Ferment Radio, right? So fermentation, it's already being done with microbes. You use microbes to, ferment. So, we have a lot of experiments you can do at home yourself, even also some recipes we have on our website actually that you make with microbes. One of the experiments I always really enjoy, it's actually blowing up a balloon using yeast. So what you do is you take a bottle, you add in some yeast, some sugar, some water, and then you close it, you shake it a little bit, and then you take a balloon. You do have to stretch it out a little bit, make it a little bit more flexible, and then you just put it on top of that bottle. You basically close off the bottle using the balloon. And then, the yeast should be activated, which means there should be gases released, which then will blow up the balloon. So you can see the balloon inflate. It takes a little bit of time, a little bit of patience, but I think it's really cool. It's, something I always enjoy looking at, actually.
Yeah, then it gets very tangible when you do those experiments. And it's also one of the ones that we have on our website, and we have some multiple more as well. The one that I also really would like to try one day as well, because I've never tried it before, is looking for tardigrades or water bears. They're, I think, one of the most popular microbes that are around. They're also in some movies, and they're just really cute as well. And you can basically find them on a lot of different places, and sometimes in moss. And if you have access to a microscope at home, I would really also like you to advise to maybe try hunting for some tardigrades sometimes, because that's also a very fun experiment to do. And they're very nice to look at as well.
I also have another question which came to my mind actually during this conversation, because Micropia is physically even placed next to the zoo, and it's a part of the zoo, right?
Yes. So ARTIS is not only like the park, but we also have two musea. So we have Micropia as well as het Grote Museum, in which you really discover more about connections between, nature and humans, and how we are actually, in the middle of nature instead of, kind of governing it. So I think that's also a really cool museum. But yeah, together with these three locations, they're all located at the same square. We're part of ARTIS.
But you don't have to enter the zoo to kind of go into the museum. So you can go to the museum without entering the zoo, or you can buy a ticket for all of them, of course, if you want to. But you can just come to the museum without entering the zoo as well.
Yeah, you can get separate tickets.
Yes.
Why I even asked about it is that I think that the zoo, since this concept was even created like hundreds years ago, I think they went through a lot of like a transformation, that it is being much more questioned, like where those animals are coming from, how they are treated. And maybe it's also this question like, okay, microbes are not animals, but I even, to be honest, when I grow them, in some fermenting jar, I'm thinking, am I like good for them or not, because at the end it's some species that I kind of take control over. Do you have this kind of more, I don't know, philosophical discussions of like how we treat microbes?
Yeah, the most things that we think about is like when we like grow these massive amounts of culture, and how do you get rid of them in a safe way so that the environment isn't hurt? I think that's one of the biggest things that we think about in our lab. How can we process all of those microbes? And of course, one time when you use one of your cultures and then you need to remove them sometime again. So I think those are the main things that we worry about in the lab when we're growing microbes.
Yeah, and you also have to imagine microbes. There's been a lot of research on this, right? Indeed, like how are we treating microbes? And science has shown that they are not capable of like feeling the same way we do, so they don't know pain, so to say. And you also have to imagine, not even just in this lab, but if you're fermenting your food, you're going to eat it, you're also eating microbes. So that's basically the same, right? If you go and eat sauerkraut, then you're also eating microbes. If you eat yogurt, you're also eating microbes.
I have one actually question I wanted to ask at the beginning, but I will ask it at the end. It's actually like two questions in one. So could you tell us a bit more like how Micropia came into being, and maybe how old is it? But also like how you forecast Micropia future. Like, is there something you think the museum should do or it's dreaming about?
Yeah, as we also said in the beginning, like Micropia, it came to be when in 2014, at least that's when the museum was actually opened. Of course, development started way before that. And it really came to be with the idea that, well, indeed, our artist is showing like different aspects of nature. It was showing the animals, it's showing the plants, that invisible small life, that those microbes, they weren't really displayed. And they're very important part of nature. So it's really important to also show those. Because, well, without those microbes, nature as we know today, it wouldn't exist. So they opened this, microbe zoo, so to say. Yeah, so I think that's how it came to be. Mm-hmm. Now, how it's going to be in the future, well, there's of course a lot of ideas, a lot of really cool ideas, I think. But how those are going to play out, we don't know yet. So, I can't really tell you anything about that.
We don't really know much about it. But one thing that we kind of want to do, because of course we want to show all aspects of the microbe world, and now we're mostly talking about bacteria and like eukaryotic cells, and we don't really have any archaea in the museum, so we kind of want to see if we can maybe do a new exhibition about one of those, but I don't know when that is going to take place. But it would be really nice also to highlight archaea a little bit more as well.
Right now it's like a big dream, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a big dream.
It's not something we're actually actively working on yet, but maybe in a few years it would be really cool. But no promises.
Do you think that displaying this particular kind of microbes would be like more challenging from technical viewpoint, or it just like it's more the case of like displaying yet another kind of microbes?
They're more difficult, I think.
Yeah, they're more difficult. Yeah. Like of course you have archaea that are growing on more like inside our bodies and stuff as well. But we kind of want to highlight the more extreme archaea, so that really live under extreme conditions. But then it's way more difficult to show that in a museum, because of course we can't really create very big pressures like you would have on the sea floor, for example. And that's what you, of course, need to grow them. So that's, I think, a very big technical challenge as well.
Maybe this is like this fascinating part of Micropia itself, that it's about how to make something so invisible to our senses visible and kind of understandable. And maybe with some species it is more difficult than others. Not every species will blow that balloon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The most common technique to see the microbe, of course, is the microscope. But what other ways we have or which are available technologically these days to make us kind of perceive microbes, and what technologies are being used in the museum?
Yeah. So we do use a lot of microscopes, and that is, of course, you can really see the microbe itself. Of course, if you grow them on an agar plate and you make colonies, then of course you can also see what the microbes look like. And if the fungi grow a little bit bigger, then you can see them with the naked eye. So that's very easy. But like new different techniques, maybe in the future we do more digitally, or make it more like immersive by incorporating VR or those things. But that could be something for the future. But that would be very fun to do, because then you can really immerse yourself into the world of microbes. But that, of course, is not like realistically. I wish we could create a shrink ray, just like in the movie Ant-Man, and can write our own tardigrades. But I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. It would be fun.
Yeah, I also feel like right now, the only way we really have to look at microbes indeed is growing them on those agar plates, or indeed magnifying them quite a lot, which is, I mean, how we also originally discovered microbes, which, Antonie van Leeuwenhoek, how he discovered those microbes. But yeah, it would be really cool if there's like indeed different ways to really make them visual. But right now I think it's still there aren't so many options around, simply because they are so small. You can't just go take a picture with your phone and then upload it. It doesn't magnify enough.
Yeah, and of course you have different techniques for microscopy. So you also have electron microscopes that can magnify to a way bigger extent. But those are right now very expensive, and we don't really have the ability to get them in our museum. That also is not tangible, and the samples are not very well prepared if you do that. I don't think that's going to be happening in the museum. So we're just going to be sticking to light microscopy for
I'm totally dreaming now about this VR microscope that we could immerse ourselves in a microbial environment. That would be so cool. With a VR set or not, may we all embody and not just intellectually comprehend our entangled relationship with microbes. That is our heritage. If you like this episode, please share it. If you would like to know more about the show, listen to this episode again, or find previous episodes, please go to fermentradio.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. We would love to know what you thought of this conversation, hear your human microbial stories, and your suggestions for the future episodes. We are always looking forward to hearing from you at hello@fermentradio.com. You can also leave us an audio message by connecting to us on our Instagram. Ferment Radio is brought to you by Super Eclectic, and it's supported by Microbial Lives, practices of human microbial cultures, a project at the Center of the Social Study of Microbes at the Helsinki University. Keep fermenting and stay tuned for the next episodes of Ferment Radio.